Hello here, I'm back. Yeah, I did record a booster save earlier, but that was a fake one. It was something that was really good. Not good enough for the channel. Okay, definitely. No, it's not good enough for the channel. It's the guy will sue me, more or less. He will just do it. He will just fucking destroy the channel. He will delete it because Cam did it, and he got his channel destroyed. Let's listen now.
A long life. But, despite still not feeling quite like a person again yet,
No, that was for Changing Gears, which is a great fan fiction, but I'm not gonna recommend the channel because this is the guy. Because when I asked for if I could upload, do text to fan fiction asking permission, he said no. He hates that. Mm.
Chapter 12. While the first two teams took their positions in the city, Izuku and the rest of the class gathered in a nearby observation room. Inside was a massive screen for viewing the fight from dozens of camera angles. Recovery Girl was sitting in a small chair watching the monitor with a steaming cup of warm tea in her hands. "Hi Miss Cho. What are you doing here?" Izuku saluted in greeting. "Hi Izuku, I'm here because All Might wanted me here for when someone inevitably got injured," she answered tiredly. He offered her a glowing hand. "Want something stronger than tea?" he asked, knowing that she was running on fumes now that it was the last class of the day. Recovery Girl placed her small hand in his palm and smiled. "It's good to know there are still some gentlemen left in the world." "Is he always such a cinnamon roll?" Kyoka asked no one in particular. "Yup," Mei answered easily. On the screen both teams had taken up their positions, one inside the building and one outside across the street. All Might keyed his mic. "Both teams will have 5 minutes to prepare, followed by 10 minutes to complete your objective. Your 5-minute prep time begins, now." The monitor split into two feeds, with one watching Rumi and Mina while other watched Kirishima and Tokoyami. "Who do ya think'll win, Izuku?" Okako asked. "It's hard to say, but I think Kirishima is a very straightforward fighter like Rumi. I have a feeling this will end up as a match between an unstoppable force versus an immovable object." Izuku pondered aloud. Speakers came to life and the audio from the cameras began to stream into the room. Everyone's focus was solely on the monitors. Tokoyami placed a shadowed hand onto Kirishima's shoulder and whispered, "New move, Umbral Doppelganger." The shadow on his hand moved and slithered onto Kirishima's back. Dark shadow popped out of Tokoyama's back and slung an arm around him. "They grow up so fast," he said while pretending to wipe away a tear. Kirishima gave a thumbs up and headed off to meet the attackers head on. The feed switched to the attacking team. "So what should we do, Rumi?" Mina asked, her eyes darting all over the rabbit girl's muscular form. "Kirishima will probably come straight for us. I'll keep him and hopefully Tokoyami busy. While I'm doing that, you can look for the bomb. If you need help, radio me and I'll break away. I'm way faster than them, so it shouldn't be a problem." Rumi answered confidently with a grin. The buzzer sounded and Rumi blasted forward low to the ground and into the building with such force that she left rabbit footprints in the asphalt. Mina approached the side of the building and used acid to create handholds in the concrete to climb the face of the building to the top floor. Almost immediately upon entering, Rumi came across Kirishima in a boxing stance in the middle of a dark hallway. He was alone. The hallway lights had been smashed out until only enough to see were left. In the darkness, Izuku could have sworn he saw Kirishima's shadow blink. Kirishima pounded his hardened fists together. "I knew you wouldn't let me down. Let's do this," he challenged. Kirishima's shadow moved then. It lifted itself off the ground and floated behind him, attached to his back. The shadow looked much like Tokoyama's dark shadow, but this one was a shadowy specter of Kirishima's upper body. It even had the same sharp teeth. Then it spoke. "Let's do this," it parroted its host. "Now we're talking." Rumi roared as she charged. She jumped with her left heel high in the air. Luna arc. She yelled as she brought her metal-encased heel down. Kirishima's shadow blocked the attack with crossed forearms as Kirishima himself lashed out with a jab at Rumi's stomach. The hardened fist met flesh, but Rumi didn't even grunt in pain. He might as well have punched a brick wall. Izuku might have worried that Rumi would overdo it and kill the poor boy, but he knew that since she could gauge an opponent's strength so well, she could also tailor her incredible strength to match each opponent flawlessly. Rumi began trading rapid-fire blows with the shadow and its host. The redhead was mostly defending against the white-haired girl's onslaught, but the shadow loosed a barrage of punches with no care for its own well-being. After dodging a haymaker, Rumi cracked the boy's hardening with a solid push kick to the stomach. Kirishima slid backwards as he clutched his abdomen before straightening to his full height with a defiant gleam in his eyes. His hardening reformed and creaking could be heard as the sharp angles created by his quirk began to multiply. "You won't get past me," he challenged as his quirk went into overdrive and he began to look like he was made entirely from jagged stone. "Unbreakable," he bellowed as he dove back into the fray, Rumi meeting him head-on with her grin shining in the low light. Rumi began wailing on the now seemingly indestructible boy while taking hits from the shadow as it rained blows, shouting "Aura!" each time. "Now this is a fight!" Rumi cheered with near-manic glee. Izuku knew that Rumi's options were limited in this situation. She couldn't grapple without losing most of her skin in the process, and she couldn't build up enough speed in the hallway to blow through Kirishima's defenses in a single blow. She could probably just pick the redhead up by his feet and wield him like a club until he lost consciousness, but the shadow prevented that. She probably could just run and meet up with Mina, but Rumi would rather die than run from a fight. It was honestly her biggest weakness. He had faith in his girlfriend though. She wasn't just a fighter, she was a warrior, and a prodigy at that. He had never managed to beat her in a spar after all. Izuku turned his focus to the other screen with Mina entering the room with the bomb. The room was dark like the hallway as Mina creeped along. Then the shadows spoke. "Abandon all hope, Yehu, enter here," said the shadows. Mina eeped and flung acid at the voice only for it to be swatted aside by a massive dark shadow that made the large room feel cramped. Tokoyami was positioned in front of the bomb ready to intercept while also baiting Mina into accidentally damaging the bomb and losing. Dark Shadow thrashed after Mina as she skated around the room on her acid. She was proving to be an incredibly nimble fighter as she dodged sweeping blow after sweeping blow. In the darkness of the room, Dark Shadow was much bigger than before and his strength matched his size. After dodging a blow that would have sent her through the concrete wall, she spun in place and flicked her tail towards Tokoyami. On the end of her tail was a huge glob that launched and slapped against Tokoyami's chest, sending him splatting against the fake bomb. Capitalizing on Mina's momentary stillness, Dark Shadow swatted her into a wall where she slumped to the floor unconscious. Instead of burning acid, the glob turned out to be a very sticking substance that behaved like rubber cement on steroids. Try as he might, Tokoyami couldn't move. Even Dark Shadow only ended up getting stuck as well trying to help. "Tokoyami and Ashido are both out. 1 minute left," All Might announced over the earpieces. Everyone refocused on the fight between Rumi and Kirishima. Rumi was bruised and bleeding in places where Kirishima's hardening had scratched at her. Kirishima was breathing hard and barely able to move as he defended with every ounce of strength against the force of nature that was Rumi. Rumi hopped backwards and grinned in a way that could only be described as feral. She bolted forward in a white blur that displaced the air in the cramped hallway. She jumped into the air and launched herself into a forward spin. "Luna fall!" she yelled as she used her built-up momentum to swing a powerful axe kick straight down towards Kirishima's head once more. Above him, Rumi smirked. With her momentum halted, she whipped her upper body backwards into the beginnings of a backflip and lashed out with her other leg in an upwards motion straight for Kirishima's jaw. "Blood Moon Rising!" she roared as steel toes met a hardened chin, causing a clacking of teeth that echoed down the hall. Unprepared for the sudden blow, Kirishima was lifted off his feet as his quirk failed. Rumi landed on her feet from her backflip just as Kirishima's unconscious form landed in a heap with his sentient shadow slithering away along the walls. Kirishima is out. Offense wins. All Might cheered. A few minutes and kisses from Recovery Girl later, both teams met in the observation room. When they had entered, most everyone cheered for the two teams, but none louder than Izuku, Mei, and Himiko. Though Tsu and Okako were pretty close. Rumi nearly collapsed into Izuku's arms while grumbling, tired. He began restoring her energy via cell activation as he held nearly all her weight up. Mina flopped against him while whining, "Me too." He rolled his eyes but complied anyway. Mina was not so subtly pressing her face into his pecs as attraction wafted off the bubblegum-skinned girl. He wondered if she had forgotten that he was an empathy or if she just didn't care. "Sorry Midori, Mina's kind of a brat when she's tired." Toru apologized as she tried and failed to remove Mina, who still had her arm slung around his neck. Izuku laughed. "I don't mind, so don't worry. An excellent first matchup that showcased how your quirks have evolved in the past days. Can anyone tell me who they think deserves the title of MVP and why?" All Might asked. Izuku would have raised his hand to answer, but both were currently occupied with holding up Mina and Rumi's weight. Momo raised her hand. Tokoyami should be MVP because he was the one that came up with his team's plan, assisted Kirishima from afar, and defended the objective while baiting Ashimina into making a mistake by destroying the bomb. He wanted to argue that Rumi was the MVP, but he couldn't fault the tall girl's logic. He still wanted to argue, but he might be a bit biased, so sue him. While everyone's effort was truly plus ultra, I have to agree with young Yayorozu. Tokoyama's team may have lost, but his decision-making earned him the title of MVP. The bird-headed boy's feathers ruffled at all the positive attention. Nejire flitted in front of All Might. Hey. I think Rumi should get some recognition for holding back on that last kick enough to not kill Kirishima. I can tell she had the strength to do it. Nejire cheerfully added, causing some faces to drain of color. On that dark note, All Might announced that the next team should take their positions. Tsu pecked Okako on the cheek. "Don't you dare hold back on me, Ribbit." Okako's face became frighteningly determined. "I'd never insult ya like that." Seeing this, Momo clapped her hands together before turning to Kyoko with an excited gleam in her eyes. She bent at the waist until she was eye level with her much shorter girlfriend and pressed a finger to her cheek, silently asking for a good luck kiss as well. Kyoko rolled her eyes but smiled nonetheless. She pressed her lips to Momo's cheek. "You're lucky you're cute," she groused in fake annoyance with red cheeks as her jacks poked each other. Several minutes later, Okako and Momo approached the building but did not enter. Okako's helmet was sealed and she was wielding two bulletproof shields that police often used. Each shield had the faint pink glow of Okako's quirk. Momo stood protected behind Okako's shields as the side of her abdomen glowed with her quirk. A belt of grenades burst from her self-healing costume just above her hip. She fed the belt into her grenade launcher and took aim at the windows. She began launching a barrage of tear gas canisters through the windows of the building. There were more than was probably necessary, but there was also more than someone could just pick up and throw back out the window. Gas was pouring out from every window and door when Aoyama appeared in a window coughing and fired two lasers from his palms at the girls. Barely able to see, one laser went wide but the other struck Okako's shield. The laser reflected off of the shield and struck a nearby building. Momo had mirrored the surface of the shield. Before the Ravenette could retaliate, Tsu's tongue launched out from a window and snatched one of Okako's shields from her grip. The gravity wielder must have increased the shield's gravity at the last moment because it crashed into the face of the building and stuck there like a shuriken. 5 minutes left. Now. Momo cried as she loaded a different belt into her weapon and ran for the door. Okako squatted low, her thick legs coiled like a spring. "Shoot and star." She slapped her thigh as her legs unfurled in a burst of strength. She weightlessly careened at the window where Aoyama was still trying to aim his lasers. She held the shield in front of her and increased her weight to the maximum as she collided with the wall next to the window. She crashed through the face of the building and directly into Aoyama as he attempted to take cover, sending him sprawling. Tsu was almost on her, too fast for her to move the shield in time to block a roundhouse kick that dented the shield and sent her sliding backwards despite her increased weight. Okako threw the shield at Tsu and increased its gravity mid-flight. It collided with Tsu with a slap that sent her flying backwards. Aoyama was just getting to his feet again when Okako bull rushed the diminutive boy and shoulder-checked him into the wall with all the grace of a runaway train. Aoyama slid to a seated position as unconsciousness claimed him. Aoyama is out. Okako whirled to face Tsu, but she was nowhere to be seen. The tear gas-filled room was empty. A cough sounded from above her. She whipped her head up just in time to see Tsu reappear and shoot her in the neck with a dart fired from her blowgun. Okako wobbled on unsteady legs as Tsu's paralytic toxin did its work. She collapsed to the ground, wholly unable to move. Eureka is out. 2 minutes left. Tsu leapt from the ceiling to the floor and raced into the hallway to find Momo. Her senses were shot from the tear gas, but there wasn't enough time left to be cautious. Momo was standing in the hallway with her grenade launcher pointed directly at her. Momo had found her first. Even from the cameras, Momo cut an imposing figure with tear gas billowing around her tall, gas-masked form. Momo held down the trigger as she marched forward. Rapid-fire explosions of pink smoke erupted in the confines of the hallway and against Tsu. Tsu was sent pinballing down the hallway as the concussive rounds blasted everywhere. She finally came to a stop against the end of the hallway in a crumpled heap, unconscious. Azui is out. Offense wins. Izuku made a mental note to never let Mei and Momo team up in the future. Speaking of Mei, he turned to the pinkette. When did you have the time to make Tsu a blowgun? He asked. While I was drinking my morning coffee. Why? Mei responded as if it was no big deal. Just curious. Izuku said while laughing at himself internally for underestimating his inventing prodigy of a girlfriend. Once everyone was conscious and healed, the two teams came back to the observation room. Momo was still apologizing profusely as she came in. Tsu was steadfastly waving her off as she held up most of Okako's weight. Aoyama was walking behind them, looking the least sparkly he had seen the boy. Tsu was feeling indecisive for a moment when she saw him watching them, but quickly seemed to make a decision as she steered Okako towards him. Okako is still a bit numb, Ribbit. Could you see if your healing quirk could help? Please. Tsu asked. No problem, you want some too? He asked as he held out two glowing hands. Before Tsu could answer, Himiko snuck up behind the pair and pushed them both into his chest while trying to reach him from around them. Group hug. She said with mischief. Himiko, maybe they didn't want to hug me. Izuku lightly chastised, not wanting to make them uncomfortable. He felt Okako and Tsu melt into the hug and against him. He could have sworn he heard Tsu inhale deeply through her nose as affection and attraction made themselves known. I think you know otherwise, Ribbit, Tsu croaked happily against his ABS. Okako hummed in a slurred agreement, still somewhat under the effects of the toxin. Both of you were amazing out there. He whispered. A moment later All Might took his position, but not before Nejire landed next to Momo. How come you didn't have Eureka use her quirk on you and jump through the window with her? Were those pink explosions the same as the mines that are sometimes used in the sports festivals? Nejire asked, so close to Momo that her prodigious chest pressed against Momo's stomach. Kyoko was standing right next to them with a nearly glowing blush. Her eyes were glued to the way Nejire's chest was pressed against her girlfriend's stomach, and Momo's chest looked like it was about to smother the shorter girl. To Izuku's surprise, Kyoko wasn't feeling jealousy at the proximity, quite the opposite in fact. Momo didn't seem to mind in the least. Surprisingly, She just pursed her lips together as if she was trying to think of a way to explain. They are the same. The company that provides those mines is a subsidiary of the Yaoyorozu conglomerate. I was worried that Uraraka's quirk would affect my rounds and increase their velocity to potentially lethal levels. Momo explained with a smile down at the shorter girl. That's some quick thinking. It's good you're so smart. Nejire praised. Momo blushed a bit at that, and Izuku could feel some affection as well as attraction come off the girl. In fact, all three were feeling something similar. Wait, you're a Yaoyorozu of the Yaoyorozes? Shiro asked in bafflement. Momo blushed even harder. Yes, but please don't treat me differently due to who my parents are, she pleaded. All Might clapped his hands together to gain everyone's scattered attention. Now that was some siege by the offense. The defenders also adapted admirably. Who wants to tell me who the MVP is this time? Okako, because she kicked ass. Rumi blurted out without raising her hand. Izuku raised his hand away from Okako's back, making the girl grumble at the loss of contact before returning it quickly. I think Momo should be the MVP. Not only did she come up with a plan that capitalized on the other team not having air filtration, but also planned for Aoyama's lasers. She also had the foresight to not have Okako use her quirk on her in case it would make her weapon more deadly. Izuku explained his reasoning. I agree. Young Yaoyorozu proved a capable leader. Now let's move on to our next match. Mei zipped up to Rumi and pulled her down by her shoulders for a kiss before grabbing Aitsa by the wrist and dragging him off. Hitachi caught up to Todoroki as they began to exit the room. I don't think we properly met. It's nice to meet you. Wow, I didn't realize your eyes are so pretty. I'm not here to make friends. Todoroki interrupted with a dismissive tone. Ah. Sorry. Hitachi apologized dejectedly as they both left the room. Izuku wasn't sure what the hell Todoroki's problem was, but that was uncalled for. Once the teams were in position, everyone watched the two teams prepare. Okay, I think I have a plan. Hitachi started but was cut off by Todoroki. Just stay out of my way. Todoroki dismissed yet again. On the other screen, Mei was waving her hands animatedly at Aitsa and seemed to be arguing with him. Come on. It's technically not against the rules to move the bomb or leave the building. Mei argued. It violates the spirit of the exercise to take the bomb and just run. Aitsa countered. All Might laughed before holding his hand up to his ear. Young Hatsum is correct, and a hero must use every advantage given. He said over the radios, but only to their team. Mei laughed in triumph before they readied their plan. Minutes later the buzzer rang and All Might boomed, begin. Todoroki confidently approached the building with Hitachi trailing behind him. He laid a single hand on the building, and in a matter of seconds every surface of the building was frozen in a layer of ice. He breathed out a mist of supercooled breath as he was about to step into the building but stopped short. Up there! Hitachi yelled while pointing to the neighboring rooftops. Aitsa could be seen with the bomb strapped to his back with cables sprinting across rooftops away from them. That wasn't all though, something floated high above him, backlit by the sun. On the other screen a floating drone camera was focused on Mei. She floated high above the street with metal wings that unfolded seamlessly from her power cell backpack. The metal wings looked skeletal in appearance, but each bone was rectangular in shape with thrusters burning at the tips. She aimed her Exodus rifle. There was a charging sound for a moment before she fired. A sonic boom sounded as the round traveled for Todoroki. The round struck him in the chest with a wet slap that was comparable to the sound of someone belly flopping from a great height, followed by the sound of electricity being discharged. Todoroki had the wind knocked out of him and was thrown bodily to the ground from the sudden transfer of kinetic energy as his muscles seized. Thinking fast, Hitachi grabbed a surprisingly still conscious Todoroki and dragged him inside the building. The tables had suddenly been flipped as they found themselves on defense. Mei patrolled the skies outside looking for an angle with her X-ray vision. Cool wings. Hitachi yelled to Mei. Thanks. Mei's distorted voice responded. Why didn't my quirk work? She's just going to keep us pinned until the timer runs out. Hitachi yelled over the sounds of Mei's bullets whizzing through windows by their heads. Todoroki was scowling and didn't say anything, he just stomped a foot down outside of cover. A glacier exploded into being and managed to reach all the way up to Mei and encase her feet in ice. Mei held her rifle in one hand and punched the ice encapsulating her feet, shattering it with the enhanced strength of her suit. Hitachi looked down and noticed that the ice that layered the floor was now melted into a thin layer of water, but too late. Mei fired another round, but this time at the ground. Another slap could be heard before both boys' muscles locked up from the electricity of the round but were still conscious. Mei fly, Mei said through her helmet speakers in a distorted voice. Dozens of small winged insectoid robots flew from a small cylinder on her lower back. They swarmed the building while the two boys were still recovering from their shock. The mayflies kamikazed into them and exploded into a pink capture foam that quickly spread to cover all but their heads. Aizawa and Todoroki are both out. Defense wins. I wonder if Hatsum would be open to exchanging some blueprints. Momo wondered aloud. Hey Green, remind me not to let your girlfriend and mine team up. Kyoka said while side-eyeing Momo. Momo scoffed in indignation but didn't argue. Was thinking the same thing, heartthrob. He said in a teasing tone. Kyoka blushed as her ear jacks spasmed. What? She asked. Well, you send your heartbeat through your jacks, so heartthrob seemed an appropriate nickname. He answered with a smug grin. It makes sense I guess, but just call me Kyoka. Kyoka said as she tried to get her blush under control. He might have been worried he had overstepped if he couldn't sense her affection. Momo yanked the girl into a suffocation by boob-type hug. Aw, that's a perfect nickname for you, dear. Maybe as a hero name. Kyoka gasped for breath once she managed to free herself. I'll think about it, she mumbled, still red-faced. A couple minutes later Mei flew into the room with her helmet open and scooped Rumi off her feet. My babies worked perfectly. Did you see? Did you see? She frantically asked as she twirled Rumi in the air. Rumi laughed heartily. Of course I did, and of course your babies worked. You're the one that made them after all. Mei beamed and kissed Rumi deeply as she descended to the ground. Todoroki had a hollow look as he trudged over to a corner and stared down at his feet unseeing. Hitachi approached Izuku. That sucked, I'm not a pretty girl, but can I have a hug too? He asked. Of course. Izuku said as opened his arms to the boy. Hitachi all but collapsed against him. Izuku rubbed a few circles into his back. It's a shame you're not into guys. He said with a muffled voice. Izuku laughed and tightened his hug. So I'm told. I think it might be a bit obvious who deserves it, but who can tell me why young Hatsum deserves MVP? All Might asked. Momo immediately raised her hand. She came up with a plan that was not only creative given the rules of the exercise, but also gave little to no chance for the opposing team to succeed. Even if she was taken down, the offense team would have been hard-pressed to catch up to Aizawa with the head start she gave him. An excellent takeaway, young Yaoyorozu, but it should be noted that young Aizawa prioritized the safety of his teammate when he could have just saved himself. Young Hatsum used every advantage she was given and to great effect. Let this be a lesson that a hero should take advantage of anything and everything available to them. Even if I can punch most of my problems away in a single punch, I still make advantages where I can. This line of thinking will not only keep you safer, but it will also help you save lives. Going forward, however, the bomb must remain inside the building. All Might explained. Now. Next teams take your positions. He added a second later. Momo kissed Kyoka sweetly on the cheek. Good luck, dear. Mina winded up and slapped Toru on the ass hard, and said, go get 'em. They'll never see you coming. Before bursting into laughter. Mina. Toru yelped out as she turned invisible, only causing Mina to laugh harder. A few minutes later Izuku watched as Toru and Kyoka waited at the top of a staircase in plain view. Kyoka had her jacks plugged into the speakers on her hands and held them forward. Toru placed a hand on Kyoka's back and whispered, "Invisibility cloak." Toru disappeared and Kyoka began to fade away as well, the refraction field emanating out from where Toru had placed her palm until they both disappeared from view entirely. Moments later Shoji and Kaminari entered with Shoji listening carefully with several sets of additional ears. The additional appendages twitched and pointed to the top of the stairs. Kyoka blasted a high-frequency wave of sound at the two boys. Unprepared for the sudden loud noise, Shoji collapsed to his knees as he held his head in pain. Kaminari recovered first and made a finger gun aimed at the stairs with the other hand covering an ear. Taser, 50,000 volts. Electricity shot from his finger and connected with an invisible Toru. Toru and Kyoka became visible once more as Toru fell to the ground writhing. Kyoka grabbed Toru and dragged her away and out of sight of Kaminari. "You find the bomb, I'll go after Jiro," Shoji said as he stood back up and reformed his appendages into fists. Kaminari nodded and they ran up the stairs together before splitting off. Shoji raced after Kyoka and found her as she rounded a corner coming towards him with a smirk. He charged forward hoping to reach her before she could get a sound wave off. Kyoka's jack slithered behind her neck and crossed sides. They plugged into the backs of what Izuku had mistaken for simple gauged earrings with an audible click. Feedback. A shock wave of sound emanated not from Kyoka's speakers, but from her chest. The sound of a heartbeat drumming could be heard as sound wave after sound wave pulsed from her in a sphere. The barrier of sound buffeted Shoji, but he swung anyway in an attempt to overpower the force field. His arm snapped and bent backwards at a gruesome angle from a blast of sound. Freeze! All Might bellowed into the headsets and everyone did just that, Kyoka's barrier dropping immediately. "Shit. I'm so sorry." Kyoka immediately apologized. "It's no issue," Shoji said casually as he grabbed the mangled limb with another and tore it off just for it to be replaced with another half a second later. "Can you continue, Shoji?" All Might asked anyway. Shoji assumed a six-armed boxing stance. "Yes, sir." "Very well. Continue in 3, 2, 1. Kyoka's pulsating force field blasted into existence once more as Shoji charged. Kraken's onslaught. Shoji began an undaunted barrage of six fists. Anytime an arm broke he tore it off to create a new one as he kept up a pummeling barrage on Kyoka's shield, trying to time his punches between blasts. He managed to sneak one past her defenses and hit her in the mouth. She hopped backwards and spit out a glob of blood before smiling with crimson teeth. Kyoka charged Shoji, causing him to backpedal in an attempt to keep his torso away from the shield. Kyoka lunged and caught Shoji with a blast, sending him reeling and off balance. She halted her shield and landed a rapid-fire combo of punches against Shoji's midsection. Shoji gasped in pain. Seeing an opening, he lunged his hands for Kyoka only for her to reactivate feedback. The proximity of the activation made him go flying into the nearby wall. Kyoka pinned him between the wall and her shield, causing him to be repeatedly slammed against the wall until unconscious. Shoji is out. Kyoka turned off feedback and went in search of Kaminari. Izuku focused on the screen watching Kaminari. He was just entering a large room with the bomb on the other side. He looked from side to side before dashing for it. Something struck his shin hard, causing him to tumble in a cry of pain. He landed on all fours and began to try and stand. His head suddenly jerked to the side from an unseen blow. He collapsed onto his face unconscious as Toru's grinning form reappeared above him, twirling her steel batons. Kaminari is out. Defense wins. Mina and Momo hugged each other and bounced together. Woo! They both shouted in unison. Minutes later both teams re-entered the observation room. Momo picked up Kyoka in a hug and began kissing her cheeks between each word. You were amazing. She crowed with affection as Kyoka attempted to hide her face from Momo's barrage of kisses. Mina picked up Toru by her hips and wrapped her tail around her midsection. That little grin you did. It did something for me, she flirted, earning her a giggle from the luminescent-haired girl. A fantastic round from all of you. Who's the MVP of the match this time? All Might questioned. Aitsu raised a hand as he adjusted his glasses. I believe the MVP was Hagakure. She aided her teammate in the beginning and prevented Kaminari from reaching the objective. Jiro, however, should be commended for aiding her fellow teammate in her time of need. Indeed. Young Hagakure is our MVP. Final team, take your positions. Rumi and Mei pulled him and Himiko into a hug. That asshole has been fucking around for years. Mei started. It's about time he found out. Rumi finished. Himiko nodded. Damn right. Izuku clenched his knuckle dusters. This fight is a long time coming. Underscore. Izuku stood inside the bomb room with Himiko. The levity of the exercise had vanished, true violence now loomed on the horizon. You should hang back and take down Shiro when Bakugo inevitably ditches him to go for me. He told Himiko. I'm not letting you fight him alone. Himiko argued with a scowl. He placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm not that child you met on that playground anymore, I feel like I have to do this myself. Fine, but radio me if you need help. Himiko begrudgingly agreed. I will. He said. Promise me. She countered. I promise. He said before heading towards the entrance. Start. All Might announced that Izuku entered the hallway that led outside. He watched as Bakugo came sailing in with Shiro trying to keep up. Both stopped short at seeing Izuku waiting for them. We can take him together. Shiro pleaded. Fuck off, he's mine. Bakugo snapped. Shiro made one last look at the two before heading off in a different direction. Izuku activated Black Cowl at 25%. Bakugo's scowl deepened at seeing his quirk activate, disbelief and betrayal raged within him. Bakugo blasted forward and swung with the right hook, but Izuku saw it coming from a mile away even without danger sense. Instead of grabbing the outstretched wrist, he ducked under it and slammed his knuckle duster-clad fist into Bakugo's stomach. If Izuku didn't know to pull his punches, Bakugo's insides would have painted the hallway. Bakugo was sent careening backwards along the floor. He pushed himself to his feet and retched. He wiped his mouth. So it's true, I didn't want to believe it, but you really were looking down on me. All this time. He gritted out between clenched teeth. Something long dormant within Izuku yawned awake. Rage. What the hell are you barking about now? Izuku fumed. Bakugo let out a war cry as he launched forward again. He let loose a blast of his quirk just outside of Izuku's range. When the smoke cleared, Izuku was unharmed as he raised his forearms to guard against the explosion. My turn. Izuku said before blasting forward with float and backhanded Bakugo through a concrete wall. Bakugo slowly stood amongst the debris. Izuku had to give it to the asshole, he was durable. His quirk's adaptation had essentially given him a minor shock absorption. Izuku floated through the hole in the wall with his eyes glowing from empathy's active ability. He didn't just suggest an emotion, he forcibly hammered fear into Bakugo. Bakugo put on a good show, but it was futile. He could sense his fear as well as see him trembling. You feel that? That's what you made me experience. Every single day. Izuku seethed. Bakugo lunged like a cornered animal. Underscore. Explosions rocked the building as Himiko hunted her prey. She just needed to find Shiro and snuff him out so she could get back to Izu. She was currently wearing Mei's form and loving every second of it. Other people could never understand the level of closeness actually being your loved ones brings. She panned through walls with Mei's X-ray vision in search of her target. There. A few rooms away, Ciro was trying to creep along silently. She would have to show the boy what a real predator was like. She dropped Mei's form and stalked forward on silent feet. She drew a spike from under her dress and ran her long tongue along it. If she accidentally hit flesh, at least it wouldn't hurt. Ciro entered the room she was in. A spike flew from the shadows and nailed his shoe to the concrete. The spike had passed harmlessly between his toes. Shit! He yelled in alarm. Himiko sprang from the shadows with teeth bared. Ciro shot out tape at her in a panic, only for her to easily dodge. Tape tornado! Ciro shouted as he spun around, a foot nailed to the floor while spewing double-sided tape everywhere, wrapping himself in the process but with none of it actually sticking to him. Himiko, now wrapped in tape, screamed in desperation, "You're keeping me from him." She extended her claws and raged against her bonds, shredding them but some still clinging to her. She threw spikes in quick succession until Ciro was pinned to the doorway with only a few nicking him. Himiko threw one last spike and simply disappeared from view. Ciro looked every which way to try and find his assailant, but to no avail. "Good night," Himiko whispered from behind him before slamming his head against the doorway, knocking him unconscious. She lapped up some of his blood running down her spikes and changed into his form. The tape still stuck to her fell away. Ciro is out. Well, there went that plan. Ciro's appearance sloughed off her before she took Rumi's form. Bakubich's turn. _______. Izuku floated inches off the floor with float, black cowl still active, and empathy still actively cramming pants-wetting fear into Bakugo. He blasted out a smoke screen that filled the room. He watched with infrared vision as a battered and bruised Bakugo searched for his attacker. Bakugo let loose a massive explosion that cleared the smoke and pushed Izuku back. Ciro is out. Fucking useless. Bakugo roared as he unleashed another massive explosion. Izuku let some of the muscles comprising Black Cowl go in order to make a single tendril that lashed out and wrapped around Bakugo's leg. What the dash, Bakugo began. The tendril that was around his leg whipped him into a wall with a thump. Izuku. I'm here. Rumi's voice sounded from the smoke. Rumi appeared beside him wearing Himiko's dress. He probably took a moment too long to appreciate how good Rumi looked in a dress. A two clicks sounded from the debris-filled room where he had tossed Bakugo. He turned to see Bakugo standing with both hands gripping a pin on the opposite gauntlet. Guess I'll just have to keep my distance. Bakugo sneered. He had designed the thing so he knew exactly what he was trying to do. Time slowed to a standstill as danger sense activated to its maximum. ______. In the control room, Mei was next to All Might screaming at the towering man, "Call it off! Call it off! Those gauntlets will level the building!" What? All Might yelled in disbelief. The gauntlets had undergone inspections like every other piece of support equipment but were deemed non-lethal. Could they have underestimated the potency of Bakugo's nitroglycerin sweat? He keyed his mic. "Stop. This exercise is over." Momo held a trembling hand up to her mouth. "I think I saw Bakugo's and Midoriya's earpieces get knocked out. I should have said something." All Might returned his gaze to the monitor with mounting horror. _______. All Might said. Himiko's voice sounded in slow motion, but whatever All Might had ordered was too late. With Himiko beside him, he couldn't be sure if he could redirect the blast safely, especially with Ciro somewhere in the building. If Bakugo believed Mei would leave him with no ranged options, he was sorely mistaken. As light began to fill the barrels of Bakugo's gauntlets, Izuku reached into one of his pouches and produced two rubber balls about the size of a marble. With Black Cowl enhanced speed, he threw both balls, one with each arm. Each splattered against Bakugo's gauntlets and began rapidly encasing it in pink capture foam. The gauntlets backfired. An explosion much bigger than any before, by orders of magnitudes, rocked the building and blew the entire face of the building off. The smoke eventually cleared to reveal All Might cradling a limp Bakugo in his arms. Both of Bakugo's arms were purple and broken to the point that they looked mangled. Probably my favorite chapter to write thus far. Basically every evolved quirk was showcased except for Hitashi's, unfortunately. His didn't work because Mei's helmet was feeding her audio and his quirk doesn't work through speakers. Fumikage can give people a minor dark shadow with limited sentience. Kiri's Hima has access to Unbreakable earlier and for longer periods. Ashido has a glue that doesn't stick to her. Most glue is inherently acidic, so it made sense. Shoji can rapidly regenerate his arms, including his main ones. Kaminari can direct his electricity up to 10 meters and is better insulated against his own quirk. Kyoka can create a force field of sound to better help her in close quarters. Toru can spread her refraction field to anything or anyone she touches. Siro's tape doesn't stick to him and he has access to double-sided tape sooner. Okako is a fucking beast in a brawl. Momo is terrifying. Mei is terrifying. Todoroki got a much-needed humbling. Hitachi got a hug buddy. Bakugo got hit with the Uno reverse card. Honestly could have killed him off with how it went down, but I'll try to rationalize why he isn't dead next chapter. As always, let me know what you liked and / or disliked.
Yeah, Bakugo would have been dead if the author didn't make sure something happens, make sure he wouldn't die from that damn explosion.
Chapter 13. Bakugo's injuries were more severe than Izuku had initially thought. The bones in his arms had essentially exploded, every rib was broken, and a lot of the skin on his arms and chest had either burst open from the force, been burned, or was a deep purple. His face was surprisingly in good shape. It seemed as if the steel collar had blocked most of the explosion when he turned his head away from it at the last second. Worst of all though, Bakugo wasn't breathing and he had no pulse. All Might had laid him down on a flat surface away from the crumbling building and was performing CPR. Recovery Girl administered small doses of healing at a time to prevent draining too much stamina from the boy. Izuku was pushing cell activation to its meager limits and beyond to give Bakugo more stamina for Recovery Girl to work with. Its healing was only a secondary goal. Izuku was struggling to stay present. Objectively, he knew he had made the right call to disable Bakugo's gauntlets since it likely saved Himiko, Siro, and possibly even himself. Knowing you did the right thing in a lose-lose situation didn't help much with living with the consequences though. He was forced to choose who may live and who may die, and he had chosen. He blamed himself. There must have been a better way. He felt a ghost of a hand on his shoulder. This can be an unfortunate reality of heroics. I'm sorry you had to see it so soon, Izuku. Nana somberly spoke from within his mind. Precious seconds passed in the tense silence while the rest of the class looked on from a distance away, Nejire keeping them from getting closer. Many were holding back tears. Bakugo might not have been the most likable person, but he was still a person. Bakugo gasped sharply as his heart began to beat again on its own. Don't move or speak. There's been an accident. Recovery Girl snapped before Bakugo could make his injuries worse. Bakugo locked eyes with Izuku. At first there was confusion coming from the blonde, but it faded and made way for relief as Bakugo's eyes fluttered closed as exhaustion claimed him. He's just asleep. He would be dead if his quirk's adaptation didn't let him fire off explosions from his bare palms without so much as a bruise. Recovery Girl noted. This was my fault. Izuku said soberly. No, we underestimated how powerful those gauntlets would be. You made the best decision you could have, given the situation. Don't you dare blame yourself, young Midoriya. All Might warned. But I backed him into a corner on purpose. I forced him to make a last resort decision. Izuku argued. Maybe you put him in the position, but you did not force his hand. He made the decision, one he is responsible for. All Might countered. Izuku could only nod as he continued to heal Bakugo. All Might's words had helped, but still, Someone almost died as a result of one of his decisions. Izuku and Recovery Girl continued to administer healing until Bakugo was safe to move. He told his girlfriends to go back to the dorms without him and to tell Eri that he would be back later tonight. Once in the nurse's office, they continued their work until the door slammed open. Bakugo Mitsuki rushed into the room, and for the first time she actually looked her age. Her normally spiky blonde hair that matched Katsuki so much was limp and frazzled. There were dark bags under her eyes even though her skin was flawless as always. She covered her mouth with a hand as she spotted her son. "My boy." She choked out as tears began to fall. Luckily, Bakugo's wounds were closed at this point and he was beginning to look better. "Hi, Auntie." Izuku greeted quietly, still channeling cell activation. He had always felt somewhat guilty about inadvertently souring the friendship between Mitsuki and his mother. When he and Katsuki had actually been friends, their mothers had immediately hit it off. He stopped going to Katsuki's house after the incident with Himiko when he was still a child, but Mitsuki and his mother had been none the wiser and became great friends over the years. He didn't know if they still kept in contact since Aldera's crimes had come to light or not, but he hoped they did. "Oh Izuku, you've grown so much," Mitsuki said as she moved to sit next to him while he and Recovery Girl continued their work. "Is he going to be okay?" Mitsuki asked. "He'll have a lot of scarring and he may have issues with the recoil from his quirk now, but yes, he'll be okay. Though I doubt that would still be the case if Izuku wasn't here," Joe answered. Mitsuki bowed her head to both of them. "I can't begin to thank you both enough for saving my boy. It was partially my fault, I'm sore. Mitsuki slapped the back of Izuku's head lightly, interrupting him. "Don't you dare apologize. Your teacher told me everything on my way over here. My son made a stupid decision that almost got himself and others killed. You're right, but it's hard to not feel guilty anyways." Izuku relented. Mitsuki ruffled his hair with a forced smile before turning her gaze to her son where her face grew remorseful. "I know what it's like to feel guilty over something that wasn't your fault. You feel like you could have done something more, anything that might have changed the outcome. All you can do is move forward and try to do better." The door to the nurse's office opened again, Izuku's mother Inko coming through it. "I got your text, Mitsuki, and I came as fast as I could." "Izuku, why are you here? Are you hurt too?" his mother screeched in alarm. "Shhh. Joe warned with a wave of her cane. "I'm not hurt, I'm helping." Izuku whispered quickly to dissuade his mother's fears. Mitsuki got up and hugged Inko, her shoulders shaking as they whispered to each other. Hours passed while he and Joe continued to heal Bakugo, and Inko comforted Mitsuki. It was nearly 11 at night, Izuku was starving and exhausted. "He's well out of danger. You should get back to your dorm and get some rest, Izuku," Joe said, breaking the silence of the room. "Okay, call me if you need me," he said as he stood and stretched his aching back. He gave his mother a hug goodnight before giving Mitsuki one as well. He activated cell activation as he hugged her tight, hoping to lighten the bags under her eyes. "Thanks, Izuku. I've missed you," Mitsuki said with a sniffle as her head was pressed into his shoulder. "I've missed you too, Auntie," he said before breaking from the hug. As he walked back to the dorms he idly wondered where Bakugo's father, Masaru, was. Izuku got back to the dorms to find the common room empty but a light on in the kitchen. He went to switch it off but found a bowl of katsudon being kept warm on a warming plate. There was a note beside it on top of some pajama shorts and a shirt. The note read, "We would have waited for you but we didn't want Eri or Yuki to see any blood you might have on you. We're waiting for you in our room, so eat up, shower, and change." He looked down and realized he did have blood still on his costume even if he had already scrubbed it from his hands. We wolfed down the katsudon like a dying man. After such a stressful day it was absolutely divine. He showered, and changed just as ordered before trekking up to bed. "Papa!" Eri greeted as he entered the room. To his surprise, Nejire and Yuki were also in his room wearing pajamas. Eri and Yuki both rushed up to him. Eri threw her arms up for a hug and he scooped her up. What he wasn't expecting, however, was for Yuki to just jump at him to join in on the hug. "Did you find mommy's food she made you? Did you? Did you?" Yuki excitedly asked as he barely caught her in time. "I sure did, it was delicious," he said truthfully but with forced cheer as he held up each girl with an arm. "Are you okay, Papa? Mamas wouldn't tell me what happened," Eri asked with worry in her ruby eyes. "There was an accident and someone got hurt. I was just helping to make sure he was okay," he answered partially. Yuki sniffed at him, her ears twitching. "You smell sad," Yuki whispered. "Papa?" Eri asked, now fully worried. "I'm feeling a little down, yeah. I think I just need some cuddles to make me feel better," he confessed with a smile and hugged them both a little tighter. "I'm great at snuggles," Yuki cheered as her huge fluffy tail wrapped around Eri and behind his back. She began purring as her and Eri threw an arm around each other and squeezed him and each other. A few moments later Nejire approached. "Yuki, we should go, Izuku has had a long day." "No, I wanna stay," Yuki whined cutely. He looked at his girlfriends and had a silent conversation before turning to Nejire. "If you want to, you're welcome to stay the night here, there's definitely enough room," Izuku offered. "I don't know, I don't want us to intrude," Nejire hummed. "Please," Yuki begged before giving Eri a pointed look. "Pretty please," Eri asked sweetly, so sweet in fact that it was suspicious. "Oh, all right. It's not fair if you both do that." Nejire huffed and puffed up her cheeks. Both girls let out a victory cheer, Eri's being much more subdued. Izuku turned his back to the bed and activated float. He rotated in the air until he was floating on his back with Yuki and Eri still holding on and giggling. He floated over the bed and lowered himself into it. Nejire got into bed and laid on her side with Yuki between her and Izuku. Yuki was still snuggled into Izuku's chest as he held her close. Nejire placed a hand on the girl's back, her hand laying atop Izuku's. Mei climbed in behind Nejire and pressed herself against her back. He could feel both Mei and Nejire's desire as they snuggled into each other. Himiko wiggled closer and did the same with Eri while Rumi big spooned Himiko. "Are you alright, Izu?" Himiko asked. "I am now, good night girls," Izuku said sleepily as he closed his eyes and fell asleep nearly instantly. _____. Izuku woke up with Yuki's face shoved into his neck and her mane of white hair in his face. Eri had flipped over and was snuggled into Himiko, the blonde purring and holding her close in her sleep. Nejire's arm was now fully draped over him and Yuki. He subtly adjusted himself so he was no longer choking on Yuki's mane and saw that Nejire was watching him. Her periwinkle eyes were soft and he picked up on both her affection and attraction. "Being a dad looks good on you," Nejire whispered. "You too, I mean being a mom looks good on you," Izuku said with a slight blush at his mishap. Nejire giggled adorably before her face took on a teasing quality. "Are you calling me a MILF?" Izuku suppressed a cough as he choked on his spit. He rallied and did his best to mimic her teasing expression. "It depends, are you calling me a DILF?" Nejire's face became a shade more serious. "I think the answer to both questions is yes." "Knew it?" Rumi groggily whispered. MILF. Himiko agreed. Motion carried, council adjourned. Mei said in her sleep. Yuki mewled as she woke. "Were you flirting with mommy?" she asked sleepily. "I think so." "Does that mean we're sisters yet?" Eri whispered excitedly. Izuku and Nejire shared a wide-eyed look before they both began to laugh. Come here you. Nejire pulled Yuki off of him and began tickling the girl. Yuki was flailing as she laughed uncontrollably, her tail going wild. I'm gonna get those toe beans. Nejire threatened playfully. Ah! Yuki screeched as her flailing increased. Eri shot up to standing, her hands on her hips in a dramatic pose. I'll save you. Eri yelled, even if it barely could count as a raised voice. She swan-dived into the tickle fight. _____. Did ya hear about them reporters harassin' people at the front gate? Okako asked as they got to homeroom. Yeah, I'm glad we didn't have to deal with that since we have dorms. Izuku responded as he sat at his desk. Okako leaned back onto his desk until she was half sitting on it, the edge of the desk pressing into her thighs just below her butt. He was pretty sure she was talking but he couldn't hear a word she was saying, he was too focused on the way her plump ass had essentially been placed on a shelf before him. It was pressed against her skirt so much that he could make out each large cheek. Before his mind could spiral further he was made aware of Okako saying his name repeatedly, her voice became higher towards the end, indicating it was a question. Ku. He jerked his head up and met her eyes, she was looking over her shoulder at him innocently, she was completely unaware of the hypnosis she had just put him in. Sorry, what were you saying? Izuku asked as he ruffled his hair. I was askin' if ya wanted to watch a movie tonight in your room with Tsu, me, and ya girlfriends. Okako asked with a light blush as her desire made itself known to him. Oh. Yeah. That sounds fun. He rushed out. I'll tell Tsu. Okako said before bouncing over to her girlfriend. Wanting to keep this next conversation private, he texted his Polycules group chat. Izuku, Okako and Tsu want to watch a movie with us tonight in our room. Okako was acting pretty flustered about it. May, oh fun. What if they make a move? Rumi, then we make a move back. That's my vote at least. Not a big fan of beating around the bush, they obviously like us. Izuku, I agree, but we should let them make the first move. May, I hope they make a move quickly then. Rumi, you're being awfully quiet, Himiko. Himiko, I think we all know my opinion on Tsu and Chiko. Besides, I've probably been pushing for this too much anyway. Izuku, you're not pushing anything, Himiko. We're all adults and can make our own decisions. Rumi, duh, you really think you can make me do anything I don't want to? May, PSH, you can barely make me sleep. Rumi, invite Nejire and the kids too. The bell rang and everyone took their seats who hadn't yet. Izawa-sensei entered not a second later. Bakugo's seat was still empty. Where's Bakugo? I thought he was healed. Kirishima asked immediately. He's on bed rest until Friday. Izawa said. Is he getting expelled for trying to kill us? Himiko asked, jubilant at the prospect of not having to deal with Bakugo anymore. Izawa looked more tired than usual as he answered, he would be if he had heard All Might declare the end of the match and decided to ignore it anyway. We don't know if he had the intention of killing anyone, his gauntlets were not expected to be that potent. He has never used them, or any other quirk enhancement support gear before, so there's a possibility he underestimated them as well. I at least hope he underestimated them. I can't imagine he would strap bombs that large to his forearms otherwise. Due to the extenuating circumstances it was decided that he wouldn't be expelled, but rest assured he is on thin ice. If anything even remotely like this happens again he will face dire consequences. The answering bloodlust that rolled off of Himiko was enough to make Tsu go still and croak in fear. Himiko's ire ended as fast as it began. Sorry, Tsu, she apologized once she noticed the response Tsu had. It's okay, Ribbit, Tsu said quickly, too quickly. Now that she wasn't afraid, the receding fear and adrenaline had transformed into lust. It was peculiar to be able to sense the transition of two emotions that seemingly had nothing to do with each other. Izuku had heard theories that experiencing danger could trigger the survival instincts in both humans and animals to reproduce as quickly as possible in an effort to preserve their genes. Curious, he focused on Rumi's emotions. What she was feeling could only be described as violent arousal. He was almost worried she would throw Himiko over her shoulder and take her to a broom closet like a modern-day caveman taking a mate to his cave. You need to pick a class president. Some of you might not have known each other long, but you've already fought together. You should be able to make an informed decision. Vote, draw straws, cage fight, either way I don't care how you decide, just do. Aizawa-sensei told them with no fanfare before crawling into his sleeping bag. Cage fight. Rumi suggested way too excitedly as she eyed fucked Himiko. Himiko didn't seem to mind in the least as she wiggled her eyebrows and ran her tongue along her teeth. Rumi's grin was unhinged and he could practically see her internally debating whether or not to just take Himiko right here and now. Fearing what would happen next, Izuku shot up and quickly suggested with a small amount of panic in his voice, "We should vote." "I agree, Midoriya. This should be settled democratically," Itza said while side-eyeing Rumi. "Won't everyone just vote for themselves, Ribbit?" Tsu asked with a finger to her chin and a tilt of her head. Izuku was quickly coming to love that particular mannerism of hers, and he wasn't the only one if empathy was anything to go by. "Perhaps, but those that have stood out will doubtlessly receive at least one more," Momo reasoned. "What about Bakugo? Shouldn't he be here for this?" Kirishima asked. "Raise your hand if you would vote for Bakugo," Mei said. When nobody, not even Kirishima, raised their hand, she continued, "See. I don't think him not being here will make much of a difference." Crisis averted, Izuku sighed with relief and sat back down as Itza began passing out slips of paper to vote with. A scant few minutes later, the votes had been tallied and written on the board. His jaw slackened when his name was written with the number 15 next to it. Momo was in second place with 3 votes, one of which he knew to be his. Someone had abstained from voting. Before he knew what was happening, he was in front of the class standing next to Momo as Aizawa announced them as president and vice president. _____. It was lunchtime as he sat down with his bowl of katsudon at a large table in the cafeteria. He was joined by everyone in his class but Nejire. It made sense that she would want to hang out with her other friends, but her presence was missed nonetheless. Mei plopped down beside him with her lunch that consisted of chocolate chip waffles, chocolate pudding, and chocolate milk. He idly wondered where all those sweets went. Mei pulled him by his arm and squeezed between her breasts. He no longer wondered where all those sweets went. "Lunch Rush's chocolate pancakes are almost as good as yours," Mei chirped. Short stacks. Good. Izuku responded dumbly as he struggled to focus on anything but Mei's chest. Mei kept his arm sandwiched between her boobs as she happily ate her chocolate-infused lunch. "Izuku, I understand, but who voted for me?" Momo questioned with a hint of self-doubt lacing her words, effectively snapping him out of his reverence. Izuku was quick to quash her self-doubt. "I did. You're hyper-intelligent, a natural leader, and a caring person." Momo's reaction was obvious, at least it was to him. She looked him in the eyes with such gratefulness and affection in her onyx eyes that he didn't even need empathy to know her feelings. "I did too, for the same reasons." "Well, them, and because she's my girlfriend," Kyoka said with a light blush. "I voted for her as well." All Might himself said she showed leadership skills, Itza chimed in. "Wait, did you vote for me too, Momo?" "I don't really get why everyone else did," Izuku said. "You're kiddin', right? You've been helping us succeed from the moment ya evolved everyone's quirk." Okako nearly chided. "That, and I'm pretty sure you saved my life, dude." Siro added. "I voted for you because you have demonstrated an analytical mind, a great desire to help others at no benefit to yourself, and the ability to make hard choices. You shouldn't be so quick to wonder why everyone looks up to you, Momo said with fondness leaking into her words as he felt it wafting off her. I'll try, if you do the same. Izuku said with equal fondness. The moment was ruined when a klaxon blared and a monotonous robotic voice called out, Level 3 alert. Intruders have breached the campus. Please evacuate to designated shelters in an orderly dash. Every man for himself. A random student screamed in panic as everyone in the cafeteria began to stampede for the exit. It was pandemonium. The flood of emotions threatened to overwhelm his senses just as much as the flood of people threatened to overwhelm his balance. The instant one his classmates tried to stand, they were swept away in the flood of screaming students. Rumi was shouldering and elbowing people aside as she fought to keep near Mei and Himiko. Toru! Mina yelled in panic and fear. He snapped his gaze to where Mina was desperately attempting to reach. Toru had been invisible as she usually was around large crowds, but in her panic she stayed invisible and was now being knocked to the ground by panicked students unable to notice the floating clothes. She cried out in pain as people began to step on her. He began to float upwards as his eyes blazed with the power of empathy. Forced tranquility exploded out from him and into the hundreds of students. One for all flowed through him and empowered his vocal cords. Stop! You're students of UA, act like it! He roared from above the crowd. The students all stopped in their tracks and began looking around ashamed at how they had acted. Izuku flipped on his thermal vision and roughly shoved students away from where Toru lay. He picked the girl up in his arms and began healing her with cell activation. Toru! Are you alright? Mina frantically asked as she was finally able to rejoin her girlfriend. A little bruised, but I'm okay. Toru said with a slight wince. Tears welled in Mina's typically playful golden eyes. Thank you, Midori, thank you, she said as she hugged them both and brushed invisible hair out of Toru's invisible face. Midori, your alarm is going off. Mina said a moment later. He scrunched his brows together and looked down at his watch. Its alarm was indeed going off. His face paled as his heart dropped into his stomach. His daughter needed him. Comment and let me know what you thought or if you have a question.
What didn't work? Okay. Oh, some people are actually being more mature. Actually, let me make that for a second. But thank you for that. I did see that comment from with what you're saying. I'm not gonna, I might be doing something. I might just continue this for a little bit longer. It's probably be chapter 14, and let's see, what chapter we'll have. Let me just go to chapter 20 for a moment. Let me go there for a moment. Okay, not yet. Okay, so at least I know a bit. We have a bit before we get to Sports Festival. This is the only chapter I had not even seen yet. Sit back from me. I have a list because I know what this means. This means the 24 to update on the first, year 23, first month, and that was the 8th. I do have other ones I want to do. Like, there is one thing that we could do, though. Like, after I finish this thing, I think we just go back to this one, finish this one, finish it up again. It was updated December 23rd. I really hate this sometimes. Jesus Christ, what's that thing? If we could actually fucking legitimately finish this shit, that was really great. Most of my phone doing some work, but guys, I know you guys want some videos.
Chapter 14. Plot after the massive smut scene. Eri was having a great time playing with her hopeful sister and the Tatsuma twins when a really loud sound screeched over the room's speakers. The instant the speakers blared, steel shutters slammed closed over the door and scary guns popped out of the ceiling and pointed at the door. She startled and held her hands over her ears to block out the sound. Fuyamai-sensei was saying something but she couldn't hear her. Yuki folded down her sensitive ears to block the sound like her, but her eyes were different, they were darting every which way. Her tail was bushed up and wrapped tightly around her waist. Yuki wasn't just scared, she was terrified. I don't wanna be in a cage again. I want my mommy. Yuki screamed in panic. Eri reached for her in hopes of calming her. Yuki hissed and lashed out with her claws extended. Eri winced as she cradled her bleeding hand to her chest as her flesh knit itself back together with the power of her quirk. Yuki, it's okay, I'm here. Eri said, trying to sound brave like her papa. Stay away. Yuki warned with tears in her eyes as she scrambled away into the corner and behind a bookshelf. Eri pressed the button that made her mamas and papa come, they would be able to help. Seconds later there was a muffled sound coming from the other side of the steel shutters. Boom, boom, boom. Someone was trying to break in. The booming became louder and faster. Boom boom boom. The entire wall was shaking from the force of the blows and dust was falling from the ceiling. The door had dents in it now. They were almost through. Someone screamed. It definitely wasn't her, she was brave. There was a pause in the banging, as if the person had heard the scream. The spine-tingling, shrill sound of rending steel filled the room. Her papa came thrashing through the door like a wild animal with black claws, green energy arcing everywhere. His glowing eyes were frantic as he searched the room. His gaze turned steely when he saw her bleeding hand. What happened? Papa asked too gently. She pointed to where Yuki was still hiding and hissing at Fuyamai-sensei when she tried to get close. It wasn't her fault, Yuki's just scared. Help me save her. Eri said like a hero with a winning smile. Underscore. It wasn't her fault, Yuki's just scared. Help me save her, his daughter said with a trembling smile and false bravado. Izuku tasted rotten milk without having drank any for the second time in his life. Yuki was nearly as terrified as Eri had been the day she was rescued. He tried to push calm into the child, but just like before, the fear came roaring back. Baby! Nejire screamed as she flew into the room behind him. Nejire rushed for her daughter but was rebuffed when Yuki lashed out with her claws when she reached for her. It's me, mommy's here, Nejire begged with heartbreak evident in her voice. He could feel Yuki's terror ebb slightly, now was his chance. Izuku picked up Eri and finished healing her hand. He kneeled down next to the bookcase Yuki was hiding behind. He activated empathy and forced calm into the snow leopard child. It's okay, we are here. He said with an outstretched hand into the gap between the bookshelf and the wall. He didn't care if she slashed at him, he would not fail to reach her. A small furry hand grabbed his own. He pulled Yuki out from her hiding place and into his chest. I'm sorry. Yuki wailed as she clutched to him. Nejire had tears running down her face as she hugged all three of them. You didn't do anything wrong, Nejire said, desperately trying to comfort her daughter. That's right, it's okay to be scared, Izuku promised as he squeezed all three of them with trembling arms. Izuku felt a little bad about Nizu's blast door, but he knew it was the weakest part of the room. The walls may have looked like normal walls, but they were hiding steel even thicker. The daycare was essentially a massive panic room meant to protect the wards and the children of students at UA. The sentry guns were keyed to facial recognition as well as student ID badges that everyone was required to keep on them at all times. He knew it was unlikely anyone had gotten inside before the blast door slammed closed, but he couldn't risk it. Classes had been cancelled for the remainder of the day and the next after the ordeal. It was later revealed that only reporters had breached the campus, but Nizu wanted to review tapes and security to ensure nothing was amiss. Izuku had never agreed with Izawa-sensei's take on reporters more, they were nothing more than vultures hungry for their next meal. His mother had already contacted him and swore on her life to rain down righteous fire on the reporters that dared to scare her granddaughter. Later that night, Yuki and Eri were still clinging to each other in Nejire's lap on the couch in his room while he got an old pre-Quirk cartoon show ready to hopefully distract them. His girlfriends walked in with Tsu and Okako, all of them wearing pajamas. Tsu's yellow t-shirt dress was probably a size small judging by the way it showed off her petite frame so well. Her hair was up again in a large bow that really showed off just how much hair she had. He wondered who had more, her or Nejire. Okako's simple black tank top was fighting a losing battle to keep everything PG-13. The pink shorts she was wearing were getting eaten by her curves, he wouldn't have it any other way. He realized that Tsu and Okako had never seen Rumi's leotard pajamas only because of the way they were staring at her ass as she walked in front of them. Strut was probably a more accurate term, and he was pretty sure she was doing it on purpose. Mei was wearing one of his large shirts and a pair of his boxers. Definitely not a bra though. Nope, no bra. Himiko was, just wearing a bralette and boy shorts underwear. Welp, he hoped Nejire didn't mind how unashamed his girlfriends were in front of Yuki. Though, if she didn't say anything last night he supposed she didn't mind. He walked up to Tsu and Okako to explain why Nejire and the girls were here, but he never got to say a word before Okako squealed in delight at seeing the girls. Oh good. I was worried ya wouldn't bring the girls since I forgot to mention em. Okako said before her and Tsu rushed over and knelt in front of Nejire and began talking to the little girls animatedly. Izuku got out the popcorn, drinks, and blankets before piling onto the couch with everyone. The couch was a bit tight, but all 7 of them plus the 2 kids had managed to pile on. Nejire was on his left with Yuki on her lap and Eri on his. Okako was on his right, then Mei, Tsu, and Rumi on the end. Himiko was sprawled out like a cat across everyone's lap with her head resting in Okako's lap. Both Nejire and Okako rested their heads on his shoulder the moment the movie started. Thank you for earlier, Izuku. You don't know how much that meant to me, she whispered with love coming off her. He placed his hand on her thigh. I think I have an idea, he whispered back. Nejire turned to him, eyes widening slightly in understanding before they hooded. She angled her head up and kissed his jawline before returning her head to his shoulder. He didn't even need to look to know that everyone but the kids had seen, their emotions told him all he needed to know. Everyone was a little jealous, but in the sense that they wished it had happened to them. Deciding he didn't need to worry, he and Nejire settled into each other. Yuki and Eri burrowed into their combined blankets until they were a child burrito. They quickly became entranced by the pre-Quirk cartoon about a tall sword-wielding princess. A few episodes in, he noticed Tsu was halfway sitting on Rumi's lap and had turned away from the show with her face buried in Rumi's neck. Rumi had an arm slung around the short frog girl's shoulders while the other was playing with her hair. Himiko was staring up into Okako's warm brown eyes while the brunette trailed fingers along Himiko's arms. Mei had her head resting on Okako's shoulder while she was feeling up Himiko's toned stomach under her blanket. About halfway through the first season, both Yuki and Eri were sound asleep. The stress of the day's events and staying up late the previous night had caught up to them. Izuku carefully picked up the child burrito to take them to bed, Nejire getting the door and following him. Let's take them to my room, I think they should be together tonight and I want Yuki to wake up somewhere familiar, Nejire whispered, careful not to wake the kids. He agreed wholeheartedly, he didn't think they should be alone tonight either. He nodded and floated down the stairs so as not to jostle them. I'm going to stay with them, I get the feeling that you guys are going to want some privacy anyways, Nejire whispered after he placed them into her bed. Are you sure? You're more than welcome, he whispered. She closed the distance and wrapped her arms around his waist. She was looking straight up at him with hooded eyes that seemed to glow with a periwinkle light in the dark room. I'm sure. Thank you again for what you did today, she whispered with equal parts gratitude and love lacing her words. He cupped her cheek, Nejire leaning into the touch without breaking eye contact. Of course, I care about you and Yuki, he whispered truthfully. I care about you and Eri as well. Nejire reciprocated. Nejire closed her eyes and just enjoyed their proximity as if savoring it. A moment later she opened her eyes. Good night, Izuku, she whispered, the way she said his name causing his spine to tingle. Good night, Nejire, he whispered, her desire spiking when he said her name as well. They parted hesitantly and he absent-mindedly walked back upstairs, the way Nejire had looked at him burned into his memory. He entered his
Sorry for ending early, but I'm a little bit tired. Not as much as anyone else you probably, but Oh, fuck my body. Alright, this mostly be end for right now. I'm gonna do more of it probably later today. What else later today? Actually, be the question. Let's say later tonight or early in the morning, like near like 5 a.m. in the morning. Because right now it's like 5, 8. You see the time on my thing right there. Like mostly, you're gonna see it Friday, the early morning this time, mostly for the next episode. If it's not out by tonight, if it's not at tonight, really, I can see your comments. So,